So the book we're reading today is Chinese Cinderella story, and the main character is called Yeh-Hsien. Okay, so she's the Cinderella in the story. Okay. And that's going to be Ella who's going to help us with that role. Okay, so it's a little bit different to the story of Cinderella that you might already know. Okay, so see when I'm reading if you can spot some of the similarities and some of the differences. Okay? All right. Long ago in southern China, so the old scrolls say, there lived a girl named Yeh-Hsien. Even as a child, she was clever and kind. As she grew up, she knew great sorrow, for her mother died, and then her father too. Yeh-Hsien was left in the care of her stepmother. But the stepmother had a daughter of her own and had no love for Yeh-Hsien. She gave her hardly a scrap to eat and dressed her in nothing but tatters and rags. She forced Yeh-Hsien to collect firewood from the most dangerous forests and draw water from the deepest pools. Yeh-Hsien had only one friend. Oh, do we feel sorry for Yeh-Hsien? We go, oh, Yeh-Hsien. Her only friend was a tiny fish with red fins and golden eyes. At least he was tiny when Yeh-Hsien found him. But she nourished her fish with food and with love. And soon he grew to an enormous size. Whenever she visited her pond, the fish always raised his head out of the water and rested it on the bank beside her. No one knew her secret until one day the stepmother asked her daughter,
"Where does Yeh-Hsien go with her grains of rice?"
"Daughter?"
"Why don't you follow her?"
suggested the daughter.
"And find out."
So, behind a clump of reeds, the stepmother waited and watched. When she saw Yeh-Hsien leave, she thrust her hand into the pool and thrashed it about.
"Fish! Oh, fish!"
she crooned. But the fish stayed safely underwater.
"Wretched creature, I'll get you,"
the stepmother cursed. Okay, stepmother.
Haven't you worked hard?"
The stepmother said to Yeh-Hsien later that day.
"You deserve a new dress."
And she made Yeh-Hsien change out of her tattered old clothing.
"Now, go and get water from the spring. No need to hurry back."
As soon as Yeh-Hsien was gone, the stepmother pulled on the ragged dress and hurried to the pond. Hidden up her sleeve, she had a knife. The fish saw Yeh-Hsien's dress, and in a moment he raised his head out of the water. In the next, the stepmother plunged in her dagger. The huge body flapped out of the pond and flopped onto the bank, dead.
"Delicious,"
gloated the stepmother as she cooked and served the fish that night.
"It tastes twice as good as an ordinary fish."
And between them, the stepmother and her daughter ate up every bit of Yeh-Hsien's friend. The next day, when Yeh-Hsien called for her fish, there was no answer. When she called again, a voice came out, strange and high. Her stomach felt tight, her mouth was dry. On hands and knees, Yeh-Hsien parted the duckweed, but saw nothing but pebbles glinting in the sun. And she knew that her only friend was gone. Weeping and wailing. Can you weep and wail? Poor Yeh-Hsien crumpled to the ground and buried her head in her hands. Can you do that? So she did not notice the old man floating down from the sky. A breath of wind touched her brow, and with reddened eyes, Yeh-Hsien looked up. The old man looked down. His hair was loose and his clothes were coarse, but his eyes were full of compassion. Old man, is it?
Don't cry,
He said gently.
Your stepmother killed your fish and hid the bones in the dung heap. Go fetch the fish bones. They contain powerful magic. Whatever you wish for, they will grant it.
Yeh-Hsien followed the wise man's advice and hid the fish bones in her room. She would often take them out and hold them. They felt smooth and cool and heavy in her hands. Mostly she remembered her friend, but sometimes she made a wish. What do you think she wishes for? What would you wish for?
A friend.
Yeah. Just come back to life, money. Yeah. Now Yeh-Hsien had all the foods and clothes she needed, as well as precious jade and moon-pale pearls. Soon, the scent of plum blossoms announced the arrival of spring. It was time for the spring festival, where people gathered to honour their ancestors, and young women and men hoped to find husbands and wives. Yeh-Hsien.
Oh, how I would love to go.
Yeh-Hsien sighed. Stepsister,
You?
said the stepsister.
You can't go. You must stay and guard the fruit trees.
Ordered her stepsister. So that was that. Or it would have been if Yeh-Hsien had not been so determined. Once her stepmother and stepsister were out of sight, Yeh-Hsien knelt before her fish bones and made her wish. It was granted in an instant. Yeh-Hsien was clothed in a robe of silk, and her cloak was crafted from kingfisher feathers. Each feather was dazzling bright, and as Yeh-Hsien moved this way and that, each shimmered through every shade of blue imaginable: indigo, lapis, turquoise, and the sun-sparkled blue of the pond where her fish had lived. On her feet were shoes of gold. Looking as graceful as the willow that sways with the wind, Yeh-Hsien slipped away. Here, there she is, looking all beautiful. As she approached the festival, Yeh-Hsien felt the ground tremble with the rhythm of dancing. She could smell tender meats sizzling and warm spiced wine. She could hear the music, singing and laughter. And everywhere she looked, people were having a wonderful time. Yeh-Hsien beamed with joy. What do you think her face looked like? Show me. Very happy. Many heads turned to look at the beautiful stranger. Stepmother?
Who is that girl?
Wondered the stepmother, peering at Yeh-Hsien.
She looks a little like Yeh-Hsien,
said the stepsister with a puzzled frown. Yeh-Hsien felt the force of their stares and turned around and found herself face to face with her stepmother. Her heart froze and her smile fell. Yeh-Hsien fled in such a hurry that one of her shoes slipped from her foot, but she dare not stop to pick it up, and she ran all the way home with one foot bare. When the stepmother returned home, she found Yeh-Hsien asleep, with her arms around one of the trees in the garden. For some time she stared at her stepdaughter, and then she gave a snort of laughter.
How could I ever imagine you were the woman in the festival? Ridiculous.
So she thought no more about it. And what had happened to the golden shoe? It lay hidden in the long grass, washed by rain and beaded by dew. In the morning, a young man strolled through the mist. The glitter of gold caught his eye.
What's this?
He gasped, picking up the shoe. Come a bit further forward. Come round here.
Something special.
The man took the shoe to the neighbouring island, Tohan, and presented it to the king. King. Oh, we don't have a king. I'll be the king. This slipper is exquisite, marvelled the king, turning it over in his hands. If I can find the woman who fits such a shoe, I will have found a wife. The king ordered all the women in his household to try on the shoe, but it was an inch too small for even the smallest foot. I'll search the whole kingdom, he vowed. But no foot would fit. I must find the woman who fits this shoe, the king declared. But how? At last, an idea came to him. The king and his servants placed the shoe by the wayside. They hid and watched to see if anyone would come to claim it. When a ragged girl stole away with the king's shoe, the king's men thought her a thief, but the king was staring at her feet. Follow her, he said quietly. Open up, the king's men hollered as they hammered on Yeh-Hsien's door. The king searched the innermost rooms and found Yeh-Hsien. In her hand was the golden shoe. Please, said the king, put it on. The stepmother and stepsister watched with mouths agape. You do mouths agape? As Yeh-Hsien went to her hiding place, she returned wearing her cloak of feathers and both her golden shoes. She was as beautiful as a heavenly being, and the king knew that he had found his love. And so Yeh-Hsien married the king. There were lanterns and banners, gongs and drums, and the most delicious delicacies. And the celebrations lasted for 7 days. Yeh-Hsien and her king had everything they could possibly wish for. One night, they buried the fish bones down by the seashore, where they were washed away by the tide. The spirit of the fish was free to swim in the sun-sparkled seas forever. Oh.